Hello everyone and welcome to the last part of this series of our physical geography in which we are covering class 11th NCERT, that is fundamental of physical geography. So in this video we are covering the relief feature of oceans, temperature distribution, pressure distribution, densities and salinity of the ocean, and waves and tides and ocean currents. So starting with the oceans. There are five oceans that are there: Pacific, Atlantic, Indian, Southern Ocean, and Arctic. And they are in the order of their size. Pacific is the largest one, and Arctic is the smallest one. So you can remember this sequence by a mnemonic: Pacific, Atlantic, Indian, Southern, and Arctic. So now let us have a look at how does the ocean below water looks like. So this oceanic floor is divided into major relief features and minor relief features. Major relief features are continental shelf, continental shelf, continental floor, deep sea plains, oceanic deeps. And minor relief features are mid-oceanic ridges, submarine canyons, seamounts, atoll, bayous. Now starting with the continental shelf. Geologically, it is the extension of the part of continent, and it is the shallowest part of the ocean, and the gradient, that is slope, here is 1 degree or even less than it. Here this is the continental slope part, and from the point from where the continental shelf ends and the continental slope starts, this point is known as continental break or shelf break. Average width of this continental shelf is around 80 kilometers, and its thickness varies from ocean to ocean. Somewhere it is very narrow, somewhere it is very broad. So the Siberian Shelf in the Arctic Ocean, it is the largest continental shelf area. Siberian Shelf. Siberian. It is around 1500 kilometer wide, and somewhere it is even absent, like near the coast of Chile and Sumatra. And depth of this continental shelf is very shallow. That is, it extends from 30 meter to 600 meters. It receives massive sedimentary deposit from the rivers, and it also is a source region for the formation of fossil fuels. Now moving on to the continental slope, is the intermediate region between ocean basin and continents. It has a steep gradient from 2 to 5 degrees, and its depth varies from 200 meters to 3000 meters. It indicates end of the continent, end of continent, and Sometimes canyons and trenches are also observed here. So, trenches. And then comes a feature known as continental rise. Here the sediments coming from the continental shelf and slope deposited near the end of continental slope. So it is slightly raised from the ocean basin and it is known as continental rise. And all these continental slope, shelf break, continental slope, continental rise, and these canyons and trenches, they all together makes the continental margin. Now moving on to the deep sea plains, also known as abyssal plains. They are the flattest and smoothest regions of the world. Deep sea plains. The depth generally varies from 3 kilometer to 6 kilometer. And these plains are covered with sediments like clay and silt. Now here comes the oceanic deeps. These are the oceanic deep region. These are the deepest part of the oceans, and they are around 3 to 5 kilometers deep from this sea plains. There are around 57 oceanic deeps that are being discovered, and out of them, 32 are present in the Pacific Oceans, 19 in Atlantic, and 6 in the Indian Ocean region. Now moving on to the minor oceanic region, minor relief features of the ocean. Relief features. First one is mid-oceanic regions. So this is a mountainous, long, continuous mountain chains that is present on the ocean floor, and it sometimes become as high as 2,500 meters high, and even reaches the ocean surface. Most prominent example of this is mid-Atlantic oceanic ridge. Oceanic ridge. Next one is sea mount. It is basically mounted below the mountain below the ocean surface, which has a pointed peak like this. They are around somewhere around 3,000 to 450 meters tall. Example of this is Emperor Seamount, Hawaiian Islands. Next one is submarine canyons. So they are sometimes found on the continental slope areas and formed because of the turbidity formed due to the sediments of the rivers and oceans also. They are generally formed at the mouth of large rivers. Example being Hudson Canyon, Hudson Canyon. Next comes the Gyots. So these are flat-topped seamounts. Next one is atoll. They are the low islands found in the tropical oceans that consist of the coral reefs and surrounding by a central depression. These are the atolls. Now let us look at the temperature distribution of ocean. What are the factors that affects the distribution of temperature in the oceans? First one is latitude. Lower the latitude, higher the temperature. Second one is distribution of land and water. Land is land is more in northern hemisphere and lesser in southern hemisphere. So water is heated in a long time as compared to the land. So the northern hemisphere receives more heat than the southern hemisphere due to the presence of land. Third one is prevailing wind. If the wind is carrying the water away from the coast, then there will be upwelling of the cold current near the coast, and the cold current will make the temperature moderate. So, if the wind is blowing away from the coast, then it will moderate the temperature. That is, temperature will be low, and if the wind is moving towards the coast, then it will increase the temperature. Next come the ocean currents. If there is presence of warm ocean currents, then the temperature will be more, and if cold current is present, then temperature will be less. Now let us understand the horizontal and vertical distribution of the temperature. So vertically, the layer from 100 meters to 400 meters, it witnesses a high temperature region, and thereafter the temperature start declining sharply, which layer is known as thermocline layer, and thereafter the temperature becomes nearly constant with the depth. This is how temperature is distributed vertically in the oceans. Here in this first layer, the temperature approximately ranges from 20 to 25 degrees Celsius, and here the general temperature is 0 degree and below. Now, moving on to the horizontal distribution of the temperature on the ocean surface. The average surface temperature of the ocean is 27 degrees Celsius, and it decreases from equator to poles. And what is this rate of decrease? It is generally 0.5 degrees Celsius per latitude. 20 degree latitude, it witnesses a temperature of around 22 degrees Celsius. 14 degrees Celsius temperature is witnessed at 40-degree latitude, and near the poles the temperature is around 0 degree. and the temperature is relatively higher in the northern hemisphere than in southern hemisphere due to the presence of land. And remember one thing, highest temperature is not recorded at equator. It is in the tropical region. Tropical region. And note that average temperature in northern hemisphere is 19 degrees Celsius and in southern hemisphere it is 16 degrees Celsius. Now moving on to the salinity of the ocean. Salinity. First of all, understand what the salinity means. So it is amount of total dissolved minerals and salts in the ocean water. Total dissolved minerals and salts. And it is calculated in unit known as parts per thousand. That is amount of salt in grams dissolved in 1000 gram of ocean water, that is 1 kg. It's represented by this symbol. And 24.7 parts per thousand is the limit. After this, if the salinity is more than this, then the water will be classified as brackish water. Now let us look at the factors that are affecting the salinity of the ocean water. So it majorly depends upon the evaporation and precipitation. If the evaporation will be more, then salinity will be more. Water will be evaporated and salt will be left at that place. So the salinity of that place will be more. And precipitation, if the precipitation is more, then there will be more influx of the fresh water and the salinity will be reduced. Higher. Next is influx of fresh water through rivers and melting of ice. Fresh water. If it is more, then the salinity will be less. Next one is influence of ocean currents. If there is a enclosed sea, then its salinity will be higher as its water is not mixed with the ocean water. So generally, an enclosed sea has a higher salinity, and open seas has lesser salinity. Now moving on to the horizontal and vertical distribution of this salinity. Generally, the salinity of open seas ranges from 33 parts per thousand to 37 parts per thousand. In the landlocked areas, it has higher salinity, like Red Sea, it is around 41 parts per thousand. Let us remember some seas which have highest salinity in the water. The most saline one is Lake Van in Turkey, having a salinity of 330 parts per thousand. Next one is Dead Sea, is at border of Jordan and Israel. It has salinity of 238 parts per thousand. Next one is Great Salt Lake of America, that is salinity of 220 parts per thousand. Now, in the hot and dry regions, the evaporation is higher, so salinity sometimes also reaches 70 parts per thousand. We have already discussed. In the Arctic Ocean, the salinity varies from 0 to 35 parts per thousand. And in the Pacific, it is from 35 parts per thousand to 31 parts per thousand. In Atlantic, the average salinity is 36 parts per thousand. And of the Indian Ocean, it is 35 parts per thousand. So the maximum salinity is not recorded at the equator. Why? Because it receives heavy rainfall, due to which the influx of fresh water is more and salinity is reduced. The maximum salinity is recorded in the area of 15 to 20 degree, 15-degree north to 20-degree north, and thereafter its salinity generally decreases polewards. Remember that salinity is directly proportional to the density. That is, more is the salinity, the water will be more dense, and the dense water will sink below. So generally there is a trend that salinity decreases as we move from surface to the deeper in the ocean. So gradually is it increases with the depth, salinity increases with the depth, and then there will be a distinct zone in which the salinity increases very sharply, which is known as halocline, and thereafter a point it becomes constant. So this is how the salinity is distributed vertically. Now moving on to the next topic, which is waves and tides. So wave is generally referred to as horizontal movement of water. It is also ocean currents, and this is due to the prevailing winds and the difference in temperature, pressure, and salinity. All this affect these waves. Now these moving from a like this. This upper region is known as crest. This trough. And this distance it is known as wave height, and wave amplitude is the half of wave height. This distance between the two successive crest it is known as wavelength. Speed of the wave is measured in the knots, and wave frequency is the number of waves passing through an area in per unit time. Now moving on to the tides. The tide is the vertical rising of seawater. It is the periodic rise and fall. And what is the major reason behind this tides? So it is the gravitational pull of sun and moon. This is moon and this is earth. So the gravitational pull of moon will cause the water to rise vertically, and this is how tides form. And on the opposite side of this, the centrifugal force will be in action, and there is also a rise in water from the ocean surface. But this centrifugal force will cause the water to rise to lesser heights, and it will pull the water to more height. And if these tides are channelized between the islands or into bays or estuaries, they are also known as tidal currents. Now moving on to the types of tides. So based on the frequency, that is time period in which they occur, they are divided into three types. First one is semi-diurnal tides. Semi-diurnal tides. These are the most common, and it features two high tides and two low tides. And the time period between two successive high tides and low tides is around 12 hours and 25 minutes. Next one is diurnal tides, that is one high tide, one low tide in a day. Third one is mixed tide. So they have variation in their heights. These, both the high tides and low tides, they are equal in their heights and frequency. And these mixed tides, they have variations like this. They are both of same amplitude and height. Now comes the division of tides on the base of position of sun, moon, and earth. So when earth, sun, and moon both are in one line, that is, this position is known as syzygy. Then there will be a phenomena which is known as spring tides, and they are high tides. They occur twice a month, one during period of full moon and another one on new moon. Now comes the other type of tide which is known as neap tide. And the difference between this neap tide and spring tide is generally 7 days. Neap tide to occur, the earth, sun, and moon, they would be at an angle of 90 degree, that is known as position of quadrature. So these are generally low tide than the spring tides. Why? Because the gravitational pull of moon is more and sun is less. So they both are pulling in different directions. So this reduces the height of the tides. They also occur twice a month. And the time between high tide and a low tide during which the water level falls, it is known as ebb. And the time between low tide and high tide when the tide is rising, this time period is known as flow or flood. So this is all about the tides. Now moving on to the ocean currents. They can be understood as the rivers flowing on the ocean surface. They help us to maintain the temperature of the ocean surface and also maintains the temperature distribution across various regions of the oceans. So if the ocean current is moving from warm area to colder region, then it will be known as warm ocean current. And if it is moving from cold area to hot area, it is known as cold ocean current. Generally, it can be said that if a current is moving from equator towards the pole, then it will be known as warm ocean current, and if it is moving from the poles toward ocean, it will be known as cold ocean current. And what are the factors that are responsible for generation of these ocean currents? The most prominent one being the temperature. Second one is prevailing winds. That ocean currents move in the direction of the prevailing winds. Fourth one is gravity, and fifth one is Coriolis force. Coriolis. And density is also an factor that is responsible for movement of the ocean current. Density is a function of salinity, temperature, pressure, and salinity. Now, the surface ocean currents, they move from the region of low salinity to high salinity. And why so? We have learned that the water which have high density, or which is more saline, it will sink down to the bottom, and there will be a void which is formed here, due to which the gradient is towards low to high density. So surface ocean water move from low density to high density, and these are the major factors for development of the deep oceanic circulations, or also known as thermohaline circulations. Also note that these surface oceanic currents accounts for only 10% of the volume of the oceanic water, and these deep ocean currents accounts for 90% of the oceanic volume. Now moving on to the different currents. So you can see various currents here. The red ones are the hot ocean, warm ocean currents, and blue ones are the cold one. And generally these equatorial currents are considered as warm currents. So the major warm ocean currents are Kuroshio, East Australian, Mozambique, Agulhas, Brazil, Gulf Stream, Norwegian, Alaska, and some major cold ocean currents are California, Peru, that is also known as Humboldt current, which is responsible for phenomena of El Nino. Next one is Benguela, Canary, Labrador, Eastern Greenland, is West Australian. Now remember the name and the location of these ocean currents for the exam. This is all for the video. If you like the content, then hit the like button and subscribe the channel. Also share with your friends. If you have any suggestions, please mention the same in the comment section. Thank you for watching.